thanks all of you. I know it's been a very packed day, an even more packed week for a lot of you, those who've been here a while. So trust me, I mean, the one thing I really appreciate is just so many of you taking the time to try to learn a few things, see if there's a little more inspiration left in the day. You can wring out a few more notes you can share with your boss to make it seem like you learned something. Whatever it takes, right? So I will get into some housekeeping in a second. One thing I'll point out that actually isn't in this deck, to make it just a little more relaxed to follow along and maybe just see what other interesting people are saying on Twitter, then I posted this deck, most of it, on SlideShare, already in an annotated version. There's the follow along at home version. There are quite a few videos already embedded in. They seem to work. So that's how I've been spending a chunk of my day. So if you go to bit.ly/storymaking15, bit.ly/storymaking15, or if you just see one of the last things I tweeted, then you will have access to the deck already, even before Inbound shares this with you, maybe in full. And so I want to get into things now. For those of you who I haven't met, which is unfortunately most of you, my name's David Berkowitz, Chief Marketing Officer of MRY. It's not like Murray or Mary or something where I hear all kinds of pronunciations, but it's a digital marketing agency, formerly Mr. Youth, hence the acronym. And in advertising, we have to make things even more confusing as we go along. And so part of Publicis Group and working with some amazing clients, and some like Visa and Coke are represented here. Most of the examples here are not, so I'm just going to kind of leave that open-ended. I take inspiration where I can find it too. And so contact info is here. Again, it's in the SlideShare. You can find all this good stuff there as well. But I do welcome feedback and staying in touch and all of this. It's like, no matter how polished any of these talks are, and I like to think that this is at least somewhat polished, I feel like any talk is really a workshop. It's just kind of a springboard to share some ideas, get feedback, and keep improving it along the way. And so I never quite think of this as a finished product, and hope that especially there's a crowd that appreciates social media, that this is really the start of a conversation. A little bit about what we will cover today. So talk about the shift from storytelling to story making, some of the traits of story making. There are probably more examples than we'll get to cover. I also do want to make sure that there's a bit of time for Q&A at the very least here. So when we get toward that 10-minute mark or so, see where we are. If you have questions, if I see anyone like really itching to put their hand up, definitely try to make time for it. But let you go to the mic. This is really your session here. Some action items of what to do with all this, and a little bit of Q&A, and then there's that. So leave that part to you, no offense taken. And just to set up this talk, when I started looking at this idea about the end of storytelling and the shift to story making that I'll get into. By the way, was anyone in the bold talk I gave here last year? So that's good, because there is very little recycled material. There are going to be about 20 seconds of it, and these are 10 of those seconds, so I'm glad that this isn't a total rerun for you. But the first time I actually presented on story making was at Inbound last year, and so there's a little more full version of it. But there's this cartoon, a Markatoonist, and Tom Fishburne really summed it up. So someone had actually sent this to me after a talk I gave on it, and you see the brand telling this story, and then here's what the kids are saying. And I think this sums up what a lot of marketing storytelling is like today. Of course, none of the stories that you're telling, but just to get a sense of it. And really where where all this came from, this actually, this whole line of thinking that's been a couple years in the works, even getting to this point, was a very memorable conversation I had with my wife, and she was actually talking about some people, not just that I know, but that I'm related to, and so she was just telling me one day, venting about them. She said, all they do is tell stories. And I mean, I remember it so clearly because it was in the midst of going from one storytelling conference to another, and this conversation had absolutely nothing to do with work, and I just froze. And so I started thinking about her using storytelling as a bad word, right? And so just this idea that all they're doing is saying the same thing over and over again, not really listening to what anyone else is saying. And so it was so much about the telling aspect of it and not even caring what anyone else really thought of it. So that led down this path, and so the antidote for storytelling is what I like to call story making, and it's a way to tell stories based on what your fans, your customers, your target audience, the kinds of things that they're already talking about. So tapping into their stories, that's going to be the most interesting because the most interesting stories out there are yours, not the brand's. And I'd even asked my wife during this conversation, I asked her, think of a brand she really loves. I said, what's Coke's story anyway? And instead of telling me whatever Coke's latest commercial was, she was telling me about this time at summer camp, and they'd collect these cans with red tabs and have some of these things where they'd flip the tabs back and forth and see which boy they had a crush on. It was a whole thing, and it unlocked these memories that were so powerful that I'd never heard from her before. And I realized, like, these are the stories that are going to be the most memorable. I'll remember things like that for decades, as opposed to a lot of 30-second spots. So I decided to go on one stock photo site, Deposit Photos, and I was just curious what storytelling looks like anyway when it comes to this. I needed some good art for the talk. And so I found this one here, and this, let's see, so, let's see, found this one, really cute. So it was just one after the other. I mean, it's like, I've got a 19-month-old girl now, and she's starting to go and get into these, and it's like, I mean, she loves Winnie the Pooh and all, but usually she mixes it up. There's a little plastic doll in there somewhere. There's Elmo now is one of her first words. But here, there are always bears when you tell these stories. I really don't get it. But, I mean, storytelling itself goes back, and you've seen examples of this perhaps when, about just how ingrained storytelling is to humanity. So see an example like the Lascaux caves in France, and the 17,000-year-old caves, and people would create these stories on the wall that have actually survived for nearly 20,000 years, pretty powerful. But what's also amazing is that examples of story making go back a long way too. And this one was a little surprising to me, the Hans Cave in Argentina. And so this was something where a whole range of people were coming together to tell some story that has actually survived for 9,000 years. And so this to me was just this moving image of humanity that, we've been telling stories together for a while too. It wasn't just something that, say, the high priest of the town put on the wall and that, everyone knows what their ritual animal was. It's, let's all create something together. So getting into story making a little bit, let's just see a bit about what it is on paper, then we'll see a lot of interesting examples of this and continue the conversation. So looking at the difference between storytelling and story making. Storytelling, here's my story, right? This is, if I'm the brand, then we own every single part of it. Story making is far more participatory. Storytelling, often there's some great idea, and I work with a lot of creatives and strategists, and it's like, yeah, here's that great thing that comes up, and they hit on that big idea, and this is what we're going to run with. Story making, people have to be at the center of it. It's just there's often that insight. I saw someone talking about this, or I saw a million people talking about that. This is what we're going to base it on. We'll see examples of all these. Storytelling is typically, here's where we're going to tell it. We're going to tell this entirely through, maybe entirely through Snapchat, or I always have those conversations of, let's create a microsite for this, and this is how we're going to do it. But story making it could be anywhere, and so let's see where people want to share their own stories. Storytelling, the whole point of telling the story is typically that there's a beginning, middle, and an end, and you know what those three things are before you tell it. That's how you tend to get the budget to do this and create the brief around it. Story making is a little less predictable, and with story making, maybe you'll have the beginning and middle set, but you won't have that end point. And we'll see, even when brands think they do, they don't always. Storytelling, here is what the brand is going to give people, and that's it. And so this is so it's typically, again, that one-way street. And story making, often it relies on a bit of work from often it relies on a little bit of work from the customer's fan base. It gets people involved a bit more and becomes reciprocal and approved and versus authentic. So it's a story, a brand story has to go through, and the CEO puts their stamp on it, and the chief creative officer puts their stamp on it, and it's released. And so for story making, it's really, well, like, what's going to resonate with people? What are stories that are already being told that by the consumers, by the target consumers, and how do we make it real for them? So so there is one of those, great iPhone slides right there. So I even had to remember to put my Twitter handle on it. I'm like, let's take credit for this thing. So let's get into some of these examples here. And I'm going to do a bit of show and tell here. One of my favorite examples, and I keep looking for more examples of story making, and just my favorite that I keep going back to, fittingly also for where the whole conversation with my wife started, is what Coke has been doing now for a couple of years in the US and even before that in Australia, where the whole share a Coke moment started. So sure, a lot of you are familiar with it. I'll play a little bit of the video, I think. Here we go. And this is
think of all that we could do.
Really sweet videos that
if we started with
makes me wonder how come my time in high school wasn't anything like
and
this.
I'll keep coming back around. Hey, some things are never be.
Who are these people? Was I just having a much more solitary existence and playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends? My friends being the two people who I knew, not the entire town, coming up to have these wonderful car watches together with the most attractive people in town. Folks tapping into something here, and while I can watch this and have those miserable what-if moments forever, I'll cut that off and not get too depressed on stage. And this is supposed to be a presentation and not therapy, I think. So I might have walked into the wrong room for a minute. But if you look at what this actually inspired, and to some degree, it's like, even if the folks at Coke knew that this was going to work, replacing some of that precious real estate, right? They don't have very much space on a bottle or a can. They're very, very precious about this. I've known this firsthand from them over the years. And yet they replace this with people's names, like in a way that's never going to be perfect, right? Not everyone's going to be able to find their names. I mean, my wife is Kara with a C. She can't find her name on any of those keychain places in Times Square. Never can get any of those souvenirs for her, which is probably just as well. But then you see something like this happening, and there's no way Coke could have fully planned for this.
Whoa, you can't take that. It's got my name on it.
What's the problem?
See, oh my gosh. My voice is so manly. That was amazing. I have to try that.
Welcome.
My name just came out of your mouth.
Let's see what kind of food there is at the lunch table. Gotta get there before Jack Nicholson chugs all the clam chowder.
Put the cookie down!
No.
Now!
I said no. I don't want to.
Oh, God, please, no! 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 This has been really fun.
You sound normal.
You sound normal.
What can did you get?
What can did you get?
I seriously get chills watching this, and I won't play all of them to the end. But I mean, this is so good, right? And so again, this is Coke giving people that opportunity to share their own stories, and there's no way to predict that. Like people are going to take this like dollar product and use this to reveal one of the most intimate and important moments of their lives to millions of people out there who could wind up watching this thing. But they created that opportunity for something like this to happen, and they keep doing it in more and more places. And so it's just, often we'll see some examples of bigger brands and smaller ones and different kinds of industries, but often it's like a little too easy to show what big brands are doing out there. It's like, okay, they've got infinite resources, theoretically, not usually when working with me, but they can do whatever they want, the whole thing. They're one of the biggest brands in the world. But in this case, to change course, something like that, to change all their product, to change their approach to marketing, to even who they're typically targeting with things like this. It's like, to me, if Coke can do this, really, then anyone can. It's that flip side of it. So another example from a brand I hadn't heard of. I don't know if anyone has JBL headphones out there, but my apologies to anyone from JBL here for me not catching their marketing, if I'm your target audience. But JBL did a really funny play on this. So they've got these wireless headphones, and so they had this insight around cord fails, right? And so I didn't know what a cord fail was, but even before reading the rest of the article, I could figure it out. And they tapped some online influencers. I will play this because it was on Vine, and so it's really short.
Going down.
Oh my God!
Going down.
Oh my God!
I even remembered to set the auto loop on this. I can't believe that even worked. But so they seeded this with a couple influencers like this, and it's perfect for the prankster nature of Vine. They had millions of views for these videos and a lot of people submitting their own, and it just brought people into this. People wanted to share their chord fail moments, and they created this thing that everyone was talking about, and so it just became something really personal for people rather than, again, it's like, okay, let's go see how fast our chip is in this headphone, as perhaps some of you saw from a product announcement yesterday. And now I want to talk about a really important product innovation, one I had nothing to do with, but just admire. So one that was very much fan-inspired. So from Burger King, they brought back the chicken fry. Had any of you signed the online petitions asking for their return? Because there were some. Yeah, there are probably more people who were signing those petitions than petitioning Obama to let in refugees right now, because this is a really important issue. And so Burger King listened to the people and brought back the chicken fry. But this isn't just an insights play here, and that's a big part of it. Yeah, I know that listening comes up in a lot of these kinds of sessions. It's what they did with it that I really admire. So they created chicken fry emoji. Okay. Yes, there are such a thing as chicken fry emoji, and now they're not the default in your Android or iPhone. So they had to create them from scratch, and so people actually had to download a separate chicken fry emoji keyboard to get all these things to work. But millions of people actually did, which is the crazy thing. Right? And what really gets me is that Burger King had to totally let go. I mean, you have no clue where these emoji are going to wind up, and so Snapchat in general, for instance, is nowhere near as salacious as the media tends to think it is. Maybe I'm just referencing my own really boring Snapchat feed, but for the most part, it's just another messaging app with lots of pictures, and yet Burger King gives up all control where these emoji are going to wind up and what people are going to do with them, and I'm sure a lot of those conversations aren't brand friendly or aren't even particularly positive, and that's fine. They just want to be part of the conversation, and if you look at the difference between this and say, since Burger King rolled this out, Snapchat has introduced more ad offerings. They've got now these 10-second video interstitial ads that people tend to click right away to get back to the content that they're talking about. So, there's that interruptive nature of the advertising, but this is something just imagine on the recipient side, right? You probably don't have this app and you're receiving it from a friend, and this just becomes part of that conversation. And so for a brand to get in there and think that it even has the right to become part of people's conversations and then actually do so, it was that perfect way to seal the deal and say, hey, you wanted this thing, you're talking about it, let's give you something to talk about. I mean, you can really involve fans in very deep ways, as we've seen in some crowdsourcing models. And are there any beta brand shoppers here? And more importantly, has anyone ordered the Suitsy? Because this is one of the most amazing product innovations I've ever seen. And so think tank. I mean, you could go there and see the whole process, but it's like some others have tried to do in the past, like Quirky, where people come up with ideas and then vote on them, and there's a whole crowdfunding approach there, so there's like a bit of that Kickstarter element. And so this kind of wacky guy, Jesse, he proposed the Suitsy, and he just had some dream to make this happen. So here's what Jesse Herzog did. Let's play a bit of the video, because this is also kind of magical. And even without the amazing music, you can see this is real. Actually, There was a story in Business Insider that ran after it. It's actually funnier without the sound. Get all like Mystery Science Theater 3000 on this, or like, yeah, what is it, bad lip reading? Is that, all the better. But there was someone who wrote a story where they normally wore a suit every day, and they actually wore one of these every day for a week, and no one noticed. They were like, a couple people that were like, oh, it's a little wrinkly, maybe you should get that dry cleaned or something. But overall, like, he was having the best week of his life, and yeah. This is actually, I mean, this is the first time I've seen it without sound, and it's better. Just remember, if you go on my slide share, make sure your computer's on mute for the rest of it. Yeah. So, I mean, talk about a way to get people involved in a very literal sense, and they're entirely dependent on people like Jesse Herzog doing this ridiculous marketing for it. So, don't need to say more about that. Decentralization, mentioned that a little bit before. So, looking at a movie promotion here for the movie that Universal put out, Ouija, which, again, until I saw this example, I didn't know the movie existed. But apparently it did, and actually did very well last year. But again, talk about not being the target. And so what they did was make a social influencer disappear, and I'll show a little bit about how that happened. And their sounds back, maybe for work.
Someone here?
I don't want to delivery again.
Hi, friend.
So.
Kian's been missing for 6 days. We have no idea where he is. Where is our friend Kian?
We're gonna find Kian together. We're gonna do it.
Ouija, tell me where Kian is! No! No?
Kian!
Thanks for coming to find me. Thanks you guys for coming to find me, too.
We missed you.
So yeah, there's this guy, Kian Lawley, I mean, a crazy influencer, and so the conversation really spread anywhere. It was just, again, it was all about where people wanted to take this, and so as far as Universal was concerned, whether it was going on Twitter or Snapchat or Facebook or Vine or Instagram, it's like, all this is great. It's just like, let's bring people together, try to bring this guy back for this stunt and have some fun with it. Beats had a really fun approach where they invented the solo selfie. And so I just want to share this example mainly because when seeing what people did with this, I just really loved this response to it. You'll see, like, they came up with this whole thing about what a solo selfie is. And so this just became one of those things submitted, and those may not be the latest model of Beats headphones. It was just, you don't exactly know what people are going to do with this. He shared it on YouTube, and but they created something for people to do and just let it rip. So we're halfway through this part. I had to bring back my little friend and her bears. So get right into the next one, unpredictable. So Visa did a really big stunt earlier in the year with, is it Bad Task in this room if there are any Giants fans? I'm not going to go there. I know it's a big day for a lot of football fans here, and I just don't want to end on a sour note. So, but this is Odell Beckham Jr. Had this ridiculous one-handed cash that he became famous for. So Visa Checkout, they were promoting this one-handed nature of it, so they tapped him to see if he could complete the most one-handed catches, and he set a Guinness World Record for it. But then what happens when a stunt like this comes out is others have to get in on the act. And so this year on the receiving end is Devon Smith, who's a Hawkeye from Iowa, and some Iowa fans or alumni.
No, we're good.
And in this day and age now, you almost have to expect that this stuff is going to happen.
Come on, balls. Balls. How many seconds I got? You're at 35 seconds.
I mean, to the extent that when you're doing this kind of thing, you almost want to make moments like this happen.
All right, keep up.
It's a great opportunity.
10 more seconds. 10.
Over, dude.
Come on.
Come on.
Here you go, T. Smith.
Done.
So he blows away this record. Now Guinness isn't there, as you might know, with the whole certification process. But you had people like this just showing how it's really done and showing up Visa on this. And I think for the brand, it's a win, right? They create this conversation, and I think even a bigger win for a marketer in this case is like if you're doing some kind of stunt, then just throw down that gauntlet, make it a challenge, accept that you, the brand, might not be the ultimate winner in all this, but you win far more from getting people to participate. Another example I absolutely love is from Honey Maid. And so they've had this wholesome campaign, and one of the big problems when creating anything that they think is wholesome is there are plenty of people who disagree with them and say, what you're doing isn't so wholesome, and they then took this in a whole new direction themselves. So I just want to share a beautiful piece of creative. And a sound optional here, but this is just a striking silent film now. So I haven't talked to the brand managers here. I'd imagine going into this, they've got to expect that there's going to be some backlash happening. This is touching at least a bit on a social issue that for many people is a hot button social issue, and that's fine. But they did something pretty remarkable with all those responses, and very on brand for them, and then and it just carried things further, right? It was just a complete way that I'm sure they didn't win over many converts of those who were sending them the nasty tweets out there, but what a way to rally those who were supportive of them, and maybe get a little more exposure for those who didn't see things the first time around. So just a pretty striking response when, even in this case, I think like that scenario of a backlash was pretty easy to anticipate. Hard to anticipate what they'd actually do with it. So mentioned the reciprocal nature before. So what do we actually do to then go and have that value exchange? Adobe, they've got a whole Make It with Creative Cloud program, and when targeting college students in particular, the focus is really giving people this incredible experience. So I'll show a little bit about what, like we're like all or nothing with that. Adobe is getting more people to use its platform. It's getting people to use its tools. It's great, but it is giving something really, really tangible back to them, and so a lot of exposure for these students, and so Adobe's constantly featuring their work. And I'll share a couple more examples and then welcome some questions you might have. Another great example was from Tiffany, where they weren't getting people jobs in this case, but they did give people exposure through their own apps they created, and so they have this "What Makes Love True" section on their app where they were sharing people's stories. And then in conjunction with that, created this ring finder tool. And they said since launching both of these together, that sales actually jumped 20%. So it's hard to say exactly what part of it was from featuring people's stories that they wanted to share, but the brand has come out saying that this is something that they've wanted to speak about. The other thing, by the way, I'll mention in the deck is that any of the articles I've mentioned are all in the sources, the source field, the notes for the deck, so you can actually go and check my facts there and explore a little more yourself. I'll just share, skip over Ray-Ban, which was kind of fun. Last example I used from Starbucks. So they had this whole campaign, Meet Me at Starbucks, and this video series, a documentary on just here are these encounters that people have at their coffee shops, and it's something that is so true to their brand. They have this meeting plays out there, and so it's more than just the coffee. It's those. Did you have a job interview there? Did you have just an interesting conversation with someone? What's that like? And so they went on the road telling these kinds of stories, and kind of really different from a lot of their other marketing about the product themselves. So a video I'll skip over for now, but can absolutely watch at your leisure. So what do you do with all this? Well, ultimately for any of these, there are actions that you can consider. So for the participatory nature of story making, inviting people into those stories, and there will be that build slide at the end. So if you're taking a picture of one, you can wait till there are 6 lines up there. It'd be easier, save space on your camera roll. When it's fan inspired, you can actually just spend time listening. I know that should be old hat for a lot of people at Inbound, but when it's decentralized, just being able to organize where a lot of these things can take place and just make sure that there are methods where you're able to track where things might be most likely to occur. Planning for the unpredictable, I think makes sense. In both of the examples mentioned, that you can expect that people are going to have certain kinds of reactions, and so do you even want to seed them? Do you want to goad them a little bit? It's like, well, what if there is this backlash, or what if people try to co-opt the campaign? I think those are really relevant questions to answer. So for that reciprocal nature of it, how are you incentivizing people for their stories? And Tiffany, as you might have seen, isn't giving away rings. It's just giving people this outlet, and so for those who bought a ring from Tiffany, they'd welcome being part of that story. So the incentivization, again, might not have actual hard costs associated with it. And so when looking at those authentic stories, then accepting the kinds of stories that people are telling, and make sure that if people are talking about your brand and your products or services in entirely different ways from how you're marketing, it's figuring out what that disconnect is. But odds are you're going to have a much easier time meeting your customers where they are, rather than trying to totally convince them that you're something they don't see you as. So I do want to see if there are a couple questions. I know there's a long day. I see one in the front. You can try to speak loudly or go to the mic, but okay.
So a lot of your examples are B2C. Do you have any general advice for B2B companies?
Oh, well, B2B, I think that there are plenty of ways to actually get those stories across. It's just what are those assets that you have to work with, especially that reciprocal nature, right? So are you able to feature your customers in some way? Are you, I mean, it's something I deal with all the time as a B2B marketer myself for a marketing firm. It's just what's in it for our clients. I mean, some of our clients want to be more famous, and so can try to get some press out of it, try to get that angle. I've had those kinds of discussions come up from other marketers like a HubSpot out there. Will you participate in our white paper ebook or something, and we'll give you more exposure. So yeah, absolutely. Any others? Yeah. Yeah, well, with that, I absolutely gravitate to examples that have very pretty video case studies, so a little easier for presentation mode. But again, that's not necessarily what your customers need. And actually, in the process, if you look at a lot of this before it gets to the case study, even what JBL did, right? It was like, one Vine video and a lot of stuff on Twitter and stuff that they ultimately packaged in a certain way. But it doesn't always need that kind of polish. It often, like, this is that final version of it. So it's ultimately, again, what are your customers talking about? How can you tap what they're saying as part of your own marketing? And yeah, it doesn't have to lead to that amazing Instagrammable moment. Anything else? I know we're running right up against time here, but welcome more comments and conversations, and absolutely including more B2B examples going forward and sharing more of those. And I want to thank her and all of you, and so thanks a lot.